excited for this? You ready for this? If you are, let me know in the comments. I was gonna have you guys all your faces on there, but then I want to be able to. I've got 1 hour of time that I can deliver this. I would be like hanging out, wanting to talk to everyone. So we're gonna do kind of this format if that works with you guys, but it should still be a lot of fun. And like I said, we are recording this, so if you miss it or whatever, we'll have it. Okay. So with that said, I'm going to officially kick this party off. So what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Designing Your Character workshop. That's what I'm calling it for a couple reasons. Number one, I've been going deep with Dan Kennedy on all these things, right? I'm going through and we're building out a whole bunch of new products from his stuff. And so we're taking some of his old courses and then taking my commentary, and we're putting them together. And then we're anyway, you'll see some of the new ones coming out, but this is for the very first project. It's a project I'm calling Magnetic Story Selling. And so I'm taking all the best Dan stuff on story and I'm selling all the best my stuff on story and selling, and combining it to one super huge multimedia book, which you will see in the near future, where you have a chance to read these principles, but also like get your phone and go over a QR code and it'll start playing the videos like this video in the book and other videos. And so it's kind of a cool new format I'm playing with and experimenting with that I think is going to be huge. So anyway, it's kind of fun. And so from the Dan Kennedy world, there's a lot of stuff I'm kind of bringing over, but there's two courses that had the biggest impact on me when I first went through them that they're going to be in this book. So the first one was the personality and copy. Now this is a course that in the past they sold for $250. It was like a 2-hour presentation. So I gave you guys all access to that to listen to. And I know a lot of you did. I saw Stephanie's amazing write-up of it afterwards. So I kind of took that. And then I was looking through the lens of like, okay, there's the stuff from personality and copy, but then also like I've done a lot of stuff on attractive character and things like that. And I was like, how do I blend these things together to kind of show the best of both worlds and hopefully give you guys, something that's going to be helpful to actually implement these things. A lot of times we talk about it, but I want everyone actually implementing it. So this first session is going to be about kind of personality and copy and attractive character mushed together. And again, I'm calling it designing your character. How do you actually design your character? Inside of this book we're creating as well, the next Kennedy course I'm going to is called his influential writing workshop, which was really, really good. One of my favorites ever. And so we'll be pointing those things in as well. And so probably in a week or two from now, I'm going to give you guys the first set of audios and videos from the influential workshop. And then we'll do another workshop, another workshop like this and kind of go back and forth over the next couple of weeks. And if we like it, I can do a whole bunch of these because I've got so much cool stuff I'm going through and things I'm really enjoying. So you just have to let me know as we go through them. Okay, so right now we're talking about designing your character. And again, Dan Kennedy talks about, character development and building out your own character. I've always called it the attractive character. I got that initially from a guy named John Alanis. And those who know John, he runs a company called, I'm going to blank out on the name of it. It's johnalanis.com. But basically what he's teaching people is how to get, I think it's called how to get women to approach you. So as opposed to men going out there and trying to go and chase after girls, he tries to teach men how to get women to approach them, which is a much better opportunity, right? A better offer anyway, especially for shy, awkward people who don't want to go and pursue women. It's like, I'm going to teach you how to create yourself and craft yourself in a way to get your dream girls to come and pursue you. And one of the core principles he talks about is this concept of the attractive character. How do you build yourself in an attractive character so that women will want to come to you? And when I was learning this from John, I was already married, so I was not taking dating advice, but I was learning it from a perspective of business because John told me, he said the same principles we use he's like the same principle I use for my men to get women to come to them are the same principles you need as a business owner to get your customers and your clients to come to you. And he called it the attractive character. So that was kind of the lens that I learned this through back 15 years ago or so from John was this concept of attractive character. And then when I learned this stuff from Dan on personality and copy and kind of weave these things together, it's where a lot of what I do nowadays has kind of come from. And those who know me, obviously know I'm introverted. So by my default, it's not something I would have done by choice, right? It's something that's scary to me. That causes me anxiety. Like when I talk about these things out publicly, it wasn't something that's just like, oh, I'm going to just talk about my character, my personality. I'm going to tell my stories. That wasn't me by default. And so I had to design these things and think through them and write them out and stuff like that. So my goal with this workshop is to get you guys in an hour to kind of give you a brain dump on all the pieces I think are important. And I'll share kind of some examples in my business, like, oh, that's why I did that. That's why I did that. And hopefully be like, you'll get the aha moments. And then as you're kind of designing your characters, you'll have some ideas and resources. So that is kind of the game plan, and it should be fun. Now, to start with, this is something that I can't remember if Dan talked about it here or somewhere else. But I started learning about Marvel when I became obsessed with the MCU, right? And the Marvel universe and Iron Man and Captain America and all these different things. And I didn't understand the history behind DC and Marvel, right? There's two different companies, and DC was the big comic book company for years. Like, they were the ones you couldn't beat. And there was another company called Marvel, and Marvel always struggled against them. And actually, there's a podcast. If you guys listen to the Business Wars podcast, it's one of my favorite podcasts. They always pick two companies, and they have like a 6 audio series about these two companies competing. And one of them is talking about DC versus Marvel. And it tells the whole story, which is really fascinating. But again, DC was the big company. Marvel came out, they struggled. And then there was a guy, I think they said he was a janitor. And he was going, like the last day of his job, he went to go quit his job because he didn't want to be a janitor anymore. And they're like, well, why do you want to be a janitor? And he's like, well, I want to be a writer. And so they gave him a job writing, and this guy's name was Stan Lee. So Stan came in, and instead of writing characters the way that DC did, so DC created these amazing characters like Superman that were super and amazing, but they weren't relatable. And Stan came in, and I believe the first character he actually wrote was Captain America, where he was a normal person who then got superpowers, right? It was the first superhero that was a human that people could relate to, who then got these powers and then had the positive sides of those powers and the negative sides of those powers. And then from there, all of the Marvel characters came off of that premise of like, it wasn't just super people that are invincible. It was people who had flaws and character traits where the audience could relate to them. And when Stan started writing these characters, very quickly Marvel took over DC and then became Marvel. And DC's kind of copied in their path. They've got a couple characters that kind of they've used, right? Like Batman's a good example of someone who they've used that was a person first who became a superhero. But for the most part, prior to really Stan Lee doing this, all the characters were these superhuman things that didn't have that much relatability. And so it's fascinating because you look at like how just changing the relatability of the characters and designing the characters correctly changed that entire business, which is now worth billions of dollars, right? And so to lead off this, I'm going to show you guys a quick video. This is a video from Studio C. If you guys know Studio C, they're not as good. For like 10 years, they were like Saturday Night Live, but like really clean for kids and stuff. So me and my kids we're always watching Studio C. And this is one episode. It's called The Birth of Superman that I love for a couple of reasons. But number one, it takes this idea of designing a character that's relatable and kind of shows you how ridiculous it is. And so I'm going to lead with showing you guys that video. It's about 3 minutes long. So let me pull it up real quick here. And here we go.
All right, boys, I found us a publisher. So if we can solidify this character, we'll be good as gold. So the character's name is Superman. He's a superhero of some sort. I just don't know what sort of powers we should give him.
Maybe he has super strength, like he's incredibly strong. And he can fly.
That's a good idea.
And unbreakable skin, like invulnerability.
Oh, well, that's maybe a little too much, but we can stick with those.
And super speed.
That could be a separate character.
And super breath, like he can make tornadoes with the power of his lungs.
I think you're going a little too far.
That's not all his breath can do. He can also freeze things with it, like super frost breath. And he can hear anything from space.
That seems like a lot.
And he can bend light with his eyes at will.
What does that mean?
Oh, like laser vision, X-ray vision, telescopic vision, microscopic vision, infrared, sepia.
All right. Let's say we go with this. With all this power, maybe he has a moral issue.
Nope, he can only tell the truth. He never lies, ever. And his brain can operate at the speed of a supercomputer because he has a flawless memory.
Why would he need that?
Because he's an expert in martial arts and he has to remember all those moves.
With all his power, why does he even need martial arts?
I don't understand the question.
At least it has something to do with fighting, I guess. I thought you were going to go in a different direction.
Good idea. If his brain is that powerful, maybe he has a super heightened sense of smell and vocal abilities.
You mean like he can sing?
Yes, and he can raise his voice to the level of a loudspeaker. And he can access radio waves with his voice. And he can perform super ventriloquism.
When would that ever be used? No, let's just stick with super strength and the flying ideas.
Good call. He can fly so fast that he can control the orbit of the Earth.
What?
And he can fly in space, to the sun. That's where he gets his power.
He can fly to the sun?
Yes, and Pluto. in a matter of seconds.
Does he have a weakness?
Yes, rocks.
Okay, I mean, there are a lot of rocks, right?
From a planet 1,000,000 miles away. And the planet was destroyed.
No one is going to relate to this character. He's not even remotely human.
And he's not human.
What? How is he gonna blend in?
Maybe he grew up on a farm?
No, he has to have a secret identity.
Okay, he wears glasses, and that's it.
Okay, so where does he live? United States, Europe, China, the Soviet Union?
You gave me another idea.
Oh boy.
He can learn any language he comes in contact with. And his costume is so colorful that he can blend in anywhere.
Okay, just for brainstorming, why don't we try something opposite of this guy? A superhero with no powers.
Yes, no powers.
Fine, no powers, no growing up on a farm, no colors on his costume, no sunlight, no parents, no happiness, no friends.
He's gotta have at least one friend.
Okay, a creepy butler named Alfred. And no rules, or actually one rule, but it can't match the rest of his personality.
Actually, I think this just might work. Not eccentric, relatable, human.
And these are all of his gadgets, like a grapple and a self-driving car and razor-sharp boomerangs and...
Okay, so that was the video to kind of show Batman versus Superman. And I wanted to show that because a lot of times, most of us, right, when we just start designing our character and start sharing ourselves and our personality, we get nervous because we don't want to look stupid, right? And so what we start doing is showing all of our like everything that we're good at. Like, I'm perfect here, my family's perfect, and the pictures are perfect. We share all the highlight reel, right? And the problem with that is, even though we think that's what's going to get people to be attracted towards us, it's not. It's the vulnerability, it's the weaknesses, it's those other things that get people to bond with you, right? And so understanding that is really the key. And so I wanted to kind of share that up front as a fun way to kind of kick this off. Okay, so I'm going to actually open up. So I have a doodle for you guys, and I'll post it in the Slack group when we're done. But this is a doodle kind of put together a lot of my things from the attractive character, as well as Dan's things from personality and copy, and put them into one thing that has all of the core ideas I want to be talking about here, so we can see them in one spot. So let me share this screen right there. All right. And are you guys able to see that? Please let me know. I think you can. Cool. All right. So a couple of things. I got a couple of quotes from Frank Kern and from Dan that I want to kind of lead this with, just to get our mindsets in the right spot. And then we're going to start diving in piece by piece. And I'm going to, again, talk about it. I'm going to show you an example of how I used it, and then give you guys, well, we won't have time today, but I want you guys afterwards to go and sit down and actually workshop these things and figure out for you what you have in each of these different areas. Okay. So the first is, this is a quote from Frank Kern that I thought was really, really good in an old course. I heard him a couple of years ago. He said, when you don't have a relationship with the person you're selling, you always have the undercurrent of fear. What if I'm making the wrong decision? What if this person's ripping me off? What if all my friends laugh at me? But if you're buying from someone you know and can trust, and you felt like you've known them for a long time, even if you haven't, even if it's just the perception of knowing that person, then buying is a no-brainer. The fear is eliminated and you're ready to buy. Okay. So what Frank's saying there basically is, when people have this relationship or a perceived relationship with you, they're more likely to buy from you. Right? When they don't have that, that's when they're like, oh, I don't know who this person is. What if they're gonna rip me off? What if all these different fears start coming up? Right? And we want to get rid of all traction in the buying experience, especially when we're trying to create customers for life, where they're buying from us over and over and over again. And by building that connection, that personality is what causes that. I actually had a call with Dan today, interviewing him about story stuff. And he was telling the story of the guy who was the core editor for the National Enquirer. And he said that he spoke at one of their info summits back in the day. I wonder if I could find the recording of that. If I can, I'll send it to you guys. That would actually be really cool to see. But he said that one of the fascinating things is that at the time, National Enquirer was the most read newspaper on the planet, more than anything else, which is crazy, right? And he said what they use is they use all on the covers, like the big crazy things, like the 300-pound baby, the aliens from Mars, all these hooks to get somebody in initially. But then when it got people to continue to read over and over and over, were the stories and the characters inside of the actual the newsletter, the magazine, right? And so the same thing is true with us in our world. Like, we have to do things to hook people, to bring them into our world, right? Typically, like new customer acquisition, we're not using a lot of personality, right? We're using some kind of hook, some kind of story, some kind of something to get them in the door. But after they're in the door, this is where we build a relationship with them, and then they're more likely to buy from us over and over and over again. In fact, my next quote is from Dan. He said, customers who are involved in your story have more tolerance to be sold to frequently because of their relationship with you, not because of what you're selling. Okay. Which is, again, super fascinating when you start understanding these principles. People are more likely to buy from you over and over and over again when they do have that connection, which is important if we're trying to increase the lifetime value of our customers. And we want to keep doing this for a long time, right? Because as you know, we've talked about this, after time, people will get bored with the content, but they connect over the long term with the character, which is you. Okay. All right. So from this doodle here, again, at the top says design your character. In the middle, this is the middle premise of everything Dan was kind of talking about in the personality and copy. In that course, he said that the information business is a never-ending novel that's built on plot, characters, adventures, and ideas. Okay. So that's kind of the overarching thing here. Someone comes into your world, and now you are, again, they came in from a hook, from the 300-pound baby. They came in from the free book. They came in from whatever your hook is. They come in, and now they have connection with you as the attractive character of that company, of that business, of that brand. And now you're connecting with them, you're talking, and you're sharing stories. Okay. So the first step I want to talk over here on the top left-hand side is character identity, as we're kind of starting to structure each of our own characters. Now, again, something that I wrote down that Frank Kern said, he said that after a while, there's only so much content they're going to be interested in. They're going to get tired of hearing it, but if it's done right, they start to bond with the author. They become more intrigued with the character who's writing to them than do with the actual content. The bottom line is we remember and respond more to entertainment than we do to useful knowledge. And that's why character beats content every single time. And then the same call, Frank did a really quick quiz I thought was fascinating. He said, okay, do a 10-second quiz. Okay, so all of you guys right now, we're doing the quiz. I want you to think through this. I want you each to name 3 things that you learned about in college. That's the exact same college. You spent $100,000 to attend. Name 3 things you learned really quick. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Okay, anyone got 3 things down? No, like none of us can remember. We don't even know. Okay, now the second part of the quiz is name 3 characters from Seinfeld. Ready, set, go. Boom, Jerry, Kramer, Elaine, right? We know that. We know that instantly. Now, why do we know that? We don't remember these things we paid insane amounts of money for, right? Because we don't remember the content, remember the entertainment, the characters. Like that's what our brain remembers, grasp onto, and then we keep. Okay. And so that's kind of the key of why we create these characters, because that's what's going to get people to stick with us and keep moving forward. Okay. So over here, we've got 4 different character identities. The expert leader, we have the adventurer crusader, the reporter evangelist, and the reluctant hero. Now I did a call last week with Josh Forty about this. And it was interesting because he was asking me, he's like, well, which one are you? He's like, I felt like when you started your business, you were a reluctant hero. And then, and he's like, are you more the expert leader now? Or how do you kind of position yourself? Or how do you, like, where do you fit in this? And I explained something to him that I wanted to explain to you guys. I think sometimes we think like we need to become one of these, right? But in each story or each situation, I can move through these. Right. Like, so for example, when I'm at Funnel Hacking Live and I'm standing in front of a room of a whole bunch of alphas who are all like these like intense people, if I come in as like the reluctant hero in that audience, people are not going to pay attention to me. They're going to leave. So I come into that audience as an expert, as a leader, because I have to lead these people. Right. And I have to have like higher energy, higher everything, because that's like the persona and the personality I have to have in that situation. Okay. Sometimes I take on the persona of the reporter, the evangelist. For example, I bought Dan Kennedy's company, right? Right now, what am I doing? I'm going through, I interviewed him. I'm curating stuff. I'm like the biggest super fan. I'm bringing these things out and I'm bringing them to you as a reporter or an interviewer, right? Other times I'm the adventurer, I'm the crusader. I'm trying to find different things and discover them and bring them back. So different situations, who I am can shift around. So don't think I'm only one of these personas. It's like in each situation, I need to know how to use this persona. Okay. Because it's going to be different based on different personalities. If I would have come in, like I buy Dan's company and I would have came in as the expert leader, right? I can't, because Dan's the expert leader in that business. If I would have just came over and tried to trump him, I would have lost the faith of all of his existing members who are like, well, who's this guy right here, right? Instead, I come in as like the super fan. And all of a sudden now there are people who love me because I'm bringing in saying, hey, here's all the Dan stuff. And then other people come and say, whoa, this is who Russell's looking up to. This is who he's learning from. And it shifts that dynamic. And it's a better role and a better identity for me to use in the Dan Kennedy magnetic marketing business as the reporter evangelist versus the expert leader. Does that make sense? So it kind of shifts depending on what you're doing. Okay. So let's go through each one. So the first one is the expert and the leader. One of my favorite quotes from Jay Abraham. Jay said that people are silently begging to be led by someone who they trust has their best intentions at heart. Okay. So people want this. They're looking for a leader, looking for somebody to say, this is what you need to do. This is where we're going to go. Right. And most people aren't willing to do that. In fact, I've noticed this when sometimes I'm in a crowd at church or different places where there's a whole bunch of people, everyone's kind of standing around and everyone's just sitting there looking around like waiting, like, will somebody just stand up and do something? And for me, like, typically I hate that because it gives me anxiety. But a lot of times I'll just stand up, like, okay, this is the plan. Let's go do this. And then everyone's like, oh, and they get excited and line up and they go do something because they're all looking for somebody to stand up and be the leader. Okay. And this is especially true nowadays when people are online on social media, they're scrolling through Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever they're doing. And they're looking for somebody who can be their leader. Okay. Looking for someone they can plug into. And so this is one of the identities that's so powerful because everyone's looking for somebody who they can plug into, who can be their leader. So that's the first one. A couple of things is, how do we become an expert? And I know that for this audience, you guys know this, like, we become an expert by our results, not by our certifications. Okay. And so if you want to be an expert, if you want to be a leader, it's going and, like, whatever the art, whatever the craft is you have, is becoming really, really good at that, going out there and actually getting results for people in there. And that's how you become the expert, the leader. And that's what gives you confidence also, by the way, to be able to do the things in your world, is because of that, right? Like, I have a lot of confidence now when I sit down with any business that I know what to do to be successful because I've gotten results over and over and over and over and over again. Right. So it's not hard for me to step up and be the leader because I don't have to wonder what I'm going to do. In fact, I've noticed this. I feel like most good consultants or experts or leaders, they all have like their bag of magic tricks, right? Like, I do for sure. Like, I have like, here's 8 things I do and I'm really good at it, but that's all I really know. Right. And so if you look at, like, when I come into a company, like, for example, we bought Magnetic Marketing. I was like, okay, like, I've got a bag of tricks. I know exactly what they are. Number 1, we need an offer. Number 2, we need a funnel. Number 3, we need a launch. We need a traffic strategy. And I have my bag of tricks. I put them in there and I go and do it. Right. So for me to come into that situation, it wasn't like, what should we do, guys? I wasn't like, I didn't, people weren't sitting around wondering, because I had the identity of, I know exactly what it is. I've gotten this result a million times over. I can come in, I can be the leader, and people are going to follow me. Okay. People want something, and you, as the expert, as the leader, you have the answer, and they're plugging into that. Okay. Now, a couple of things to know about this. One of the mistakes people make as an expert or a leader is they put the attention on themselves. Okay. And this is not the role. Your goal as the expert leader is to focus on the problem that the person or your audience has and divert the attention away from you towards that problem. Okay. So what that means is, I'm not talking about, oh, I'm so successful, I did this, and like talking about your own stats and your own highlight reel all the time. Like, those things are there as hooks to bring people in, right? To give credibility to what you do. But really, as an expert leader, you're coming in and saying, look, I've already gone on this path before. I know where the mistakes are. Here's the problems. Here's the things you're going to hit. And I start focusing on the problems that somebody has, right? I'm pointing to those things. Okay. And that's how you become an expert leader. It's not by talking about how great you are, but being the person who knows where the problems are and can point them out to people. Okay. There's a quote, and I can't remember who said this. I think it might've been, anyway, one of the old time direct response marketers. I don't know if it was Robert Collier or something like that. But he said that if you can describe a person's problem better than they can, they will unconsciously believe that you have the answer. Okay. That's how you become the expert, the leader. It's not by talking about how great you are, but being able to identify someone's problem better than they can, and then be able to show them what the path is, right? And if they see that, they're like, oh my gosh, she understands this problem better than me, right? And if they have that aha, that's when they look at you as the expert and the leader. Okay. And then they're going to follow you to wherever you want to go. Okay. So my first question for you guys to think through is, in your role, what you do in your business, how can you position yourself as the expert or the leader? Okay. If we were to spend a few minutes on a workshop, I'd say, okay, sit down and think about that. Okay. Again, at Funnel Hacking Live, this is the role I take on at Funnel Hacking Live. I come in and say, look, you guys are one funnel away. Okay. But you don't know what funnel is. Like, what is it, right? You're struggling. Your company's not growing. You're losing money on ads. Like, these are all the problems you have. Don't worry about, like, I understand how to fix this. I have my bag of tricks. We're going to come in. We're going to show you exactly what funnel you need, how to grow it, how to scale it. Right. So come here. We're going to help you to figure out which funnel you need. Like, that's me coming in as the expert leader, pointing out the problems, showing them how I can, and if I had more time, I could map out, if I was writing copy, like, how can I describe this problem better than they can? But I'm helping them understand, like, man, you're spending money on ads and it's not working. And now Facebook and Apple got this big fight. Now the ad costs went up. Like, how are you supposed to survive? Right. The problem, though, is you're missing this one piece that I've been able to figure out for myself, for my clients, and blah, blah, blah. And it's this thing right here. If you follow me, I'm going to help you with that thing. Okay. So that's in a situation where I'm the expert or the leader. Okay. Also very similar to in Inner Circle, right? That's the role I take on Inner Circle, as the expert, the leader. Inside the industry we're in now, I do it as well in a lot of different places. Okay. So that's the first one. All right. Character identity number 2 is the adventurer or the crusader. And so this one was always kind of hard for me to understand. Like, what does that mean? We're going to go on adventures together. And it's more like you as the adventure crusader. You're not saying, I'm the leader, this is the path, I've trodden the path before, and this is where we're going. Instead, the adventurers out there looking for answers. They're trying to figure things out, right? They're looking for shocking or amazing discoveries, and they're going on this path and they're finding things and they're saying, oh my gosh, look what I found. I want to share this with you, right? And a crusader, they're always crusading either for something or against something. Okay. So if you look at like your philosophy that you're sharing with people, you're crusading, like this is the philosophy that we should all should be living and inspiring to and following. Or it's the other way where you're crusading against something, like this is the enemy, this is the bad person. Like we're staying away from these things because this is where we're trying to go. Okay. And in that argument, when you're in your sales presentation, your messaging, the enemy, the person you're fighting against is always the enemy. It's always the enemy's fault, right? It's not their fault. It's this other person's fault. We found, during our adventures, our crusades, we found these different things. Okay. So a good example of that in my world right now, some of you guys know I've become mildly obsessed with old personal development books. I think you guys, though some of you guys who came to Boise last time saw them, but I would say conservatively in the last 4 months, I've spent, and keep this inside the room because it's kind of awkward, but I spent probably $3.5 to $4 million on old books. From eBay, from collectors, from everything. They've been shipped here to my office. And if you've seen any of the pictures, I think I Instagrammed yesterday a shot of it really quick. But all these books I'm buying, we're building a library, all this kind of stuff for it. But my goal is, as I'm going through these books now and finding like old Napoleon Hill books, old Samuel Smiles books, the old Orange Sweet Martin books, the old Russell Crowe, we're like all these old people I'm going through and I'm finding in their books, and I'm finding things and pulling them out. And you will see over the next 12 months with my new book that's coming out, with the new projects that I'm working on, a new blog, a bunch of new things I'm working on. Like I'm finding these discoveries as the adventurer, the crusader. I went back in time. I bought these things on eBay. I found this piece. I'm bringing it out and I'm going to show it to you. Right. So I'm this adventurer going on these adventures for them and bringing back like the discoveries. Like, this is what I found for you. This is the nugget I found for you. Okay. Now I'm doing it kind of in this crazy, Russell type way. Somebody told me recently that I'm eccentric, and I was like, what are you talking about? And they explained a couple of things. I'm like, oh, weird. I guess I am. I never thought about that. You don't have to be as crazy and as eccentric as me. It could be as simple as you read a book and you found this thing that, it was a book over here, but then you figure out how to apply it for your business or your thing over here. Right. And all of a sudden you're bringing that thing back to them. Like, you discovered this thing and you're bringing it to them. Okay. So for you guys, again, we don't have time for a big workshop. If we did right now, and maybe tonight, sit down and say, okay, like, where in your marketing and your storytelling could you become the adventurer, the crusader? What do you have? What can you go find for people and bring it back to them? Like, what kind of amazing or shocking discoveries can you bring to them? Okay. All right. Now let's move on to identity type number 3, which is the reporter or the evangelist. And again, this is one that I am taking I'm leaning into this in different companies. So the Magnetic Marketing Company, this is the character identity that I'm using to grow that company. With all the Napoleon Hill stuff, a lot of it will be used here as the reporter or the evangelist. Okay, so what is the reporter evangelist? A lot of times we think about this as somebody who interviews people, right? We see this a lot of times with summits or with events or things like that, where when you find people, you bring them to you and you have a chance to interview them. Okay, so interviewers is probably the most well-known way to do this character type. Another one, which is my favorite one, is a curator. You're somebody who curates things, right? You go and you look at a million different things and you curate out the best for people. If you look at like me in this role, all of my books are curations, right? It wasn't me just saying, I'm going to write a book about this thing I had an idea on one day, right? It's me saying, I read 1,000 marketing books. I've applied a bunch of stuff. I found a bunch of stuff. And then here's my book, .com Secrets. I can show you guys my curation of all the best ideas in sequential order of how I do this. Right. And then same thing, expert secrets, same thing, traffic secrets, right? This presentation right now I'm doing with Dan Kennedy, like this calling magnetic story selling, right? This is me curating Dan's stuff and my stuff and putting it together. And I'm curating this thing to bring it back to people. Right. So curation is another way, or becoming a super fan. Like, I'm a fan of this person. Like, I'm a fan of Dan Kennedy, of Napoleon Hill, of whatever. And I'm reporting and talking about what I learned from them, what I got from them. Right. With Tony Robbins, whenever I'm promoting Tony, I'm promoting him as the reporter, the evangelist. Like, I'm his super fan. Like, he changed my life, and I'm bringing this personality type anytime I'm promoting anything Tony Robbins. Even when I'm promoting Funnel Hacking Live and Tony's speaking, I shift from like the leader, if I'm doing some promotions for Funnel Hacking Live, to, oh my gosh, like, I'm the evangelist of this guy who's changed my life. He's coming. He's 6'7". His head's this big. It's going to be amazing. Right. But I take on that role of the reporter evangelist as a super fan. Okay. And so when you're looking at the reporter evangelist, the concepts going through your head is like, I'm on a mission. I'm going to go find something. I'm going to come back and report my findings. I'm going to share them with everybody because I'm the evangelist. I'm so excited. I want to share this with everybody that I can. Okay. And again, in this kind of situation, usually the thing that you're selling is not you, it's the hero. It's the person that and the hero could be a book, it could be a personality, it could be, it could be a group of people that you're interviewing, but they're the hero in the story, not you, when you're the evangelist. Okay. And again, a good example, this is all the Dan Kennedy stuff I'm doing right now. So for you guys to workshop this out tonight, I want you to think through like what situations and how could you be the reporter, the evangelist in your business, your sub businesses, in a funnel, things like that. Okay. And then the last one here is the reluctant hero. And this was really the character identity that I leaned into probably the first decade of my business, mostly because it was what I was, right? Like, I didn't have to design this or invent it. Like I was the reluctant hero. I was awkward. I was nervous. I was shy. I was learning these things. I wanted to share with people because I was excited, but I was scared about it. I started thinking about just people who've come through our world who've done this reluctant hero very, very well. One of my favorites, they spoke at Funnel Hacking Live Orlando, but it was a company called The Truth About Cancer. And some of you guys have seen their documentaries and docuseries, but the founder of this company had like 5 or 6 of his family members in a very short window of time all died of cancer. And he was not a cancer researcher or doctor or anything, but he was frustrated. He's like, I got to figure out how to solve this for myself, personally, but also for my family, my loved ones, and all these other people are struggling. And so he came out as a reluctant hero, like, I've got to find an answer for this. And he started going out there, and then he became a reporter and interviewed people and brought things back. But he was a reluctant hero. Another example of this, more so from like how they pitched it, less of like so Kevin Trudeau, if you know him, he wrote a book called Natural Cures That They Don't Want You to Know About. Now, Kevin is by personality is a very big like leader, and so that would be kind of his character type, but the pitch, the hook was more of the reluctant hero. Like, these are these natural cures that I found about that they don't want you to know about. Right. And that's how he took on that reluctant hero character. Okay. For me, even nowadays, I use this a lot of times, especially when I'm speaking to newer audiences, when I tell my potato gun story, right? Like, I'm this introvert who's scared of people. I make this potato gun, I put it online, I start selling these DVDs. And then man, I started having success and I want to tell my friends about it. I started showing people to it, and the rest is history. So I'm using my reluctant hero by showing how me as an introvert have this experience. I need to share it with people, even though it's uncomfortable. And I figured out how to do that. And that's why I'm here today, because it changed my life and I want to change your life as well. Right. That's the reluctant hero. Okay. So for you guys right now, sitting back and thinking, okay, how can you, or where can you use the reluctant hero inside of your business? Okay. So that is the first character archetypes. How you guys feeling so far? We feeling good? Okay. Awesome. So now what I'm going to do, we're going to transition. We're going to move the arrow over to the core problem and the stories. The next thing we'll talk about. Okay. Because again, the identity is going to be how you guys are interacting with people. But now this comes over to now I know how I'm interacting with people. What are the core problems and the stories that I'm going to be solving for people? Okay. Now, at the very first ever Category Kings workshop, we had one of the writers of the book, Play Bigger, which is about how to become a Category King, came and spoke. It was fascinating because they wrote the book about how to become a Category King. They launched it and they spent the next 10 years of their life doing this work for the companies. And one of the first things he told us, he said that everything I learned about category design, I learned after the book got sold. So he's like, most of the stuff is updated. And it was fascinating. He said, if you can whittle it down to one thing, is if you can identify in a very clear phrase, what is the problem you solve? He's like, that then becomes the category. And by default, you are the category king. Because if you can explain it better than anyone else, like we talked about earlier, you can explain their problem better than anyone else, then they're naturally going to believe that you're the one who can solve this problem for them. Okay. And so he started sharing some examples. One of the examples he talked about, the problem that this company solved, he said that the problem was software. So they were going to offer the end of software, right? And if you know the story about Salesforce, that's what they did. Everyone back in the day was taking CRM software and it cost you $100,000. They go install it on your computers. It was a huge process. And they're like, we're at the end of software. We're doing this new thing called SaaS. No one ever heard of. The problem they solved is the software is horrible. And boom, they built this whole category and they became Salesforce. Okay, another one. This was a problem that this company solved. The problem was, I want to surf in cold water longer. Okay, and the product was wetsuits, right? Another one, this one was one of my favorites. He said, just because I'm tired doesn't mean I'm thirsty. So that was the problem, is just because I'm tired doesn't mean I'm thirsty. Well, how do I solve that problem? 5-hour energy. It's the energy shot, not a whole drink, that gives you energy. Okay. And so this is kind of outside of what we're going to be talking about on this call. This is more of a bigger, like when you're looking at, how you crafting your business and your, like for ClickFunnels, like what is the problem ClickFunnels solves is kind of the higher level. What we're talking about here in relation to the attractive character now is not the problem that you're going to be solving, super specific like that, but more so like when someone looks at you as the attractive character, like what is it that you're known for? Okay, and this is something that kept me probably the first 10 years of my business. I struggled because of this. I didn't understand this, right? I was learning all these different marketing things. I got really good at copywriting and driving traffic and, funnel, we didn't call funnels back then, but sales flows and autoresponder sequences and like all these things I became really good at. I became an SEO, good at pay-per-click. Like, I became good at all these things. So I would teach people all these different things. And the problem was like, someone would look at me and they're like, okay, well, Russell's like he's an internet guy, but like, what does he do? And I remember going to an event, and at the event, they had all the different gurus who were there, hanging out in the halls, and some of them were speaking. And some guy saw me, he's like, Russell, I see your stuff online. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, so what do you do again? I'm like, well, I help people grow their companies online. Right. And he's like, yeah, but what's your thing? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, Jeff Walker, he's like the launch guy. Like he's good at getting people to do launches, and Brad Callen's really good at SEO, and Perry Marshall's good at PPC. And you got, so-and-so is really good at copywriting. Like, what's your thing? I was like, oh, I can do all that. And he's like, oh, okay. And then he kind of walked away. And then I remember he went and I can't remember how much he gave like Jeff Walker, like 20 grand that day or something, because he was the product launch guy. And I remember like sitting back, I'm like, oh my gosh, like people don't know me for anything. Like, what's the core problem I solve? Like, what do I actually do as a human? Not my company, but me. When they look at me, like, what is it that Russell does? Right. And nobody could say that. I started asking my friends, like, what do you like? As I said, Jeff Walker's launch guy, Brad Callen's this, Perry's this, like, what am I? And they're like, I don't know. And my friends didn't know. My business partners didn't know. They knew I was good at what I was doing, but they didn't know where I fit, which is the problem. It wasn't until, 15 years later when we launched ClickFunnels that I was like, grab my flag, post on the ground, like, I am the funnel guy. Like, this is my thing, right? I do funnels. Now someone looks at me like, oh, Russell, like he if you want sales funnels, he does funnels. In fact, I remember when we launched when Traffic Secrets launched, I had a bunch of the big box sets. I sent one to Nicole Arbor, who's a big influencer who I follow, just as the gift. I'm like, hey, here's a gift for me. And she shared it on her page, and she said, this is from Russell, that funnel guy or something. And so she didn't even know like anything about me other than like, but she knew Russell funnels, like even her who's not in this world at all, but she connected my name with a funnel. Right. And so it's like for all of you guys, like people need to be able to connect and say, oh, so-and-so is that person. If they don't know that, then you're just like I was before. You could make some money, have some success, but until like people identify you as like, oh, you're the person, like then you're not gonna be the person. And there's already somebody who's like, oh, there's somebody that's that person. Like you got to figure out a different angle on that or a different strategy or different way to phrase that so you can be someone that's unique. So when someone's like, I need help with funnels, like, oh, you need to call Russell. Oh, I need help with traffic. Oh, call this person. I need help with YouTube traffic. Oh, call this person. I need help with free YouTube traffic, with paid YouTube traffic, with YouTube traffic, viral video. Like again, carving it up till you become the person that people can say, oh, that's who you are. So that's the thing I wanted to share. We've talked again about figuring out the core problem for your business. But I want more so like, what is the problem that you solve that you're personally known for, and identifying that. Okay. So what is the core problem? That's the first big question I want you guys to think through on your own. Okay. If you don't have one yet, again, I didn't have one for 10, 15 years. And that's why I struggled. After I put my flag in my ground, like this is where I am, it changed everything for me. Okay. And it wasn't, I was the first. There were other people doing funnels back at the time, but I came in with the bigger hammer. I was like, this is my spot. I'm taking it. Like, and because of how much noise, how much effort we put into the market, like I, by default, became that person. And it's fascinating to me because people all the time, they come to me because like I came to you, especially inside this group, Inner Circle. Like I joined Inner Circle because I wanted to build a funnel, but I got there and I stayed for the community, for the people, like, for the other stuff that they stayed for, but they came to me specifically because they either had a funnel, they wanted a funnel, they want to fix their funnel, they wanted whatever. Like that's the door that people came in. But inside that window, now they come in. Now, guess what? I can still talk about copywriting and traffic generation, all the things I did before, right? I'm still able to teach and talk and train and do all that kind of stuff. So it didn't shift my deliverables. It just shifted like what I'm known for and the gate that brings people into my universe. Okay. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. Next here is your master origin story and the thing that you're like a legend for. Okay. And so a couple of things on this. One of the mistakes people make a lot of times with their origin story or their backstory, whatever you want to call it, is they start telling their backstory about everything in their life. Like back when I was born in 1980, blah, blah, they start going back into these stories that aren't related to anything. Your origin story and your backstory is the origin story based on the product, the service, the framework, the thing that you are bringing to people, right? So my backstory is not me, my wrestling career and my this and my that. My backstory is my potato gun, right? That's how I got into funnels. That is the backstory, the origin story, the thing that I'm a legend for. I still get people all the time at the airport, literally walk up, hey, you're the potato gun guy, right? Yes, I am. Legend. The legend lives beyond it, right? And so what is it that you're a legend for? Like, what is your origin story that you can tell a million times where you will be so sick and so tired of sharing it that you want to die every time you see a potato for the rest of your life, but you keep telling it, because it's the origin story about how you discovered the core framework, the core thing, the core problem that you solve for people, right? And that story you tell so many times eventually becomes legend. Okay. What is that for you? Okay. I know Josh Ford is working on a project right now. He's calling it your master story, right? Whatever that is for you though, like, what is that? If I look at when I'm doing a webinar, it's the first 15 minutes of my webinar, that first story I'm telling about how the backstory or the origin story about how I discovered my framework. Me, again, it's potato guns. Or if you're doing a challenge, it's day one of the challenge is what you're sharing, right? It's where you're showing how, like, your hero's journey on how you discovered this thing. Okay. So what is your backstory? What's your origin story that gives you legend? Right? Where people will tell other people about it. I get people all the time. I'll see them. We're like, yeah, there's this guy and he's in Russell and he like lives in Idaho and they made this potato gun DVD and like, they'll tell my story for me. Right? I'm curious how many guys, the first time you heard this, right? The first time you heard my potato gun story was from me versus the first time you heard it from somebody else. Okay. It's happening both different ways. Okay. And I want you to know that you will get so sick of your legend, your origin story. You'll never want to tell it again. But man, it's one of the keys when you bring people into your world to give them that origin story so they connect with it. They see how you discovered the thing that they're discovering right now, right? And then it becomes the legend. Okay. So the question for you is, what is your legend? Okay. In the ClickFunnels world, right? I'm sharing funnels. For me, it's my potato gun story. Okay. But it's different. In the Dan Kennedy magnetic marketing business I bought, guess what my origin story is? It's the fact that I'm Dan's student, right? I tell the story about how I was at my house and our sprinkler broke and our whole yard got flooded. I had to dig out I spent 8 hours digging out my lawn to find the pipes to fix. And in that time I listened to Dan Kennedy and I started listening to the CDs and it was amazing. And I called this and I have the whole story about how I got into Dan's world and how I paid him for coaching. I couldn't afford it. I flew out there and now fast forward 2 decades later, dang. Fast forward 20 years later, I'm Dan's, probably one of his biggest success stories, so much so that we bought his company. I was sharing with other people because the same things that changed my life are going to change your life, right? And so that's the origin story and the backstory and the legend I'm going to keep telling to the Kennedy world until all those people know the legend of Dan's greatest student or whatever I decide to make that story be, right? But that's just kind of thinking through it for that business, right? It's gonna be different for my bone broth business, it'll be different for like my biohacking business. Like each thing I'm in, like what's the origin story or the legend about how you get introduced to the core framework and the thing that you're teaching and you are doing. Okay. So that is the master origin story or legend. Next are the miracles. What are the miracles that you perform that, again, it's kind of like legend people will talk about? Okay. A good example is Dan Kennedy, right? Dan Kennedy, he has no cell phone. He's got no email address. Only way to talk to him is a fax machine, right? Like that's a miracle. Like how in the world do you run a business like Dan and be like him and you have no cell phone or email? Like that is like a miracle, right? In Personality Copy, he shared other miracles, right? Like Jesus turning water into wine is a miracle that his disciples can go and tell people, right? In my world, guess what? A miracle that I did that I share all the time. Okay, probably the biggest one that's had the biggest impact is there was this time when Russell Brunson spoke at Grant Cardone stage and $3.2 million in sales in 90 minutes, right? That's a miracle. And my disciples share it. They talk about it to other people. Okay, I remember that TEDx event when it happened, TNC was a week later. I didn't go to TNC that time because I just finished 10X. I was tired and all sorts of stuff. So I didn't go, but I had all my friends were there and people told me afterwards that everybody in the entire hallway is talking about the fact you did $3.2 million in sales last week, like most sales ever from stage. And it became this miracle that people started talking about, started sharing over and over and over again. Okay. And so you got to create miracles or design, like what are things that you do that you can share with people that don't make sense to their human mind? It's not really a miracle, right? But it doesn't make sense to their mind. Then they can share with other people like, oh my gosh, she did this thing. She did this thing. Okay. If you've noticed, I've tried throughout my career to put a lot of these things out there into the world. And I always get people, like I had a friend that was at an event last weekend and he messaged me. He's like, man, every other speaker has mentioned some story from you. I was like, awesome. It's because I've been planning the miracles, I've been planting the seeds so that people will take these ideas, these principles and share them. Like, and then Russell did this thing over here. Like the more other people you get sharing your stories, the better. But you don't do that by just sharing a story. It's by like creating these miracles and sharing them. Okay, another good example is like when we launched ClickFunnels, the webinar at the time, the headline was my weird niche funnel. It's currently making $17,947 per day. Right? That's a miracle. People are like, what is that? And they start sharing and talking about it outside of just my ads. Okay. So question for you is like, what miracles have you performed, or could you go and craft and engineer to go do that so that people can start sharing your stories as well? Okay. And then the last one here is testimony. And this one is pretty common sense. Like, how do you get people sharing their testimonials of you, right? Some of you guys know the TV series, The Chosen, which is amazing. It's the best depiction of Christ's life that I've ever seen. It's powerful for so many reasons, but one of my favorite things is you watch, you watch Christ's life, and he's starting his mission, right? And he's starting his mission. He's going out there and he starts doing these little miracles, right? He does the miracle. And he tells his disciples, like, don't tell anybody about this. There's another miracle. Don't tell anybody about this. But then the people who experience these miracles, they're like, I gotta tell everybody. And they run around and start telling their testimonies, and it starts growing and growing until eventually, like, Christ is doing these, he's speaking or he's giving sermons and things like that. And there's just thousands and thousands of people coming because they've heard the testimony of the people whose lives they've changed, and they can't stop talking about it. They can't stop sharing it. Right. So the same thing is true for you. Like, how do you do stuff where you create success and change in people so much they want to share their testimony about working with you or having this experience with you. Right. And we've tried to do that a lot, as you've probably noticed in ClickFunnels. We try to engineer that with the 2 Comma Club awards and 2 Comma Club X, and like all these things where people, they come into our world, we give them success, they get an award. Now they're sharing these things, they're talking about it. Right. And it's amazing because like the 2 Comma Club awards alone have probably generated more traffic to ClickFunnels than any ad we ever produced. Because guess what? Everyone who's won one now runs ads of them holding their thing, like ClickFunnels gave the 2 Comma Club award. And everyone's like, what's ClickFunnels? And boom, we get, thousands of people, they sign up for ClickFunnels for free, untrackable, not from any Facebook, Google, any kind of ad, all coming in from people sharing their testimonies organically, without me asking, without me telling, right? And so for you, it's always about like, how do you create enough success that people will want to take that testimonial and share with other people because you actually did something to change their life, right? Like I probably, pre-buying Dan's company, I shared my testimony how Dan changed their life to everybody. Same thing with Mark Joyner, my very first mentor. Like I've talked about Mark all the time. I talked about Tony Robbins. Like when someone changes my life, I can't not talk about it. I share it all the time. And so for you, you got to like dramatically give people changes so they'll take that testimonial and they'll share it as well. Okay. Whew. All right. We are 50 minutes into this. I'm only halfway through. No, that's not true. The bigger ones were kind of the first ones. Okay. All right. Hope you guys are enjoying this. This is fun for me to go through and kind of compress. So hopefully you guys are enjoying the shortened version of this as well. Okay. Number 3 here, the next phase. So we start from character identity, then figuring out your core problems and your stories and how they interact and weave to build your legend and build who you are. Now we start moving over to dogma. Now, dogma is like, these are the beliefs, the laws, the principles, the rules. And you look at like the great teachers throughout time, they all have these, right? You look at Moses on the mountain, came down with the 10 commandments. Like, this is his dogma. Here's the 10 things you got to believe, right? You looked at that. You look at Napoleon Hill when he came out initially, he had like Think and Grow Rich, but then immediately afterwards came out with the laws of success. Here's the 17 laws of success, right? Like, the good people come out and they have beliefs, they have laws, they have principles, they have rules that they share with their audiences. This is one that kind of really got sparked in my head as I was listening to Personality and Copy again. I started thinking like, I have a lot of parables, a lot of frameworks, a lot of things like that, but I haven't done a super good job of like, these are the beliefs or the laws or the principles of the rules of a funnel hacker or of an entrepreneur or of a whatever that is. And so this one got me thinking a lot. And I'm pretty sure that at the next Funnel Hacking Live, next time we all hang out, I will be sharing more things that are like Russell's 10 commandments or, Russell's 17 laws of whatever, or whatever those things are, because I want more of those things where they're not just like a Facebook post or something, but it's like dogma, it's doctrine. It's like the indoctrination things where people have these things and they print them on the wall and they've got them up there. Right. When we relaunched Dan Kennedy's company, I did the magnetic marketing sprint, which was a 5-day challenge. On day number 1, I taught about like, the basics of direct response marketing. And Dan had like the 10 rules of direct response marketing. And I just taught his 10 rules. And I cannot tell you how much people love that. They love getting the 10 commandments, the doctrine, like more so than like again, I'm thinking scripturally right now. You have the 10 commandments, which are very clear cut, but then you have a whole bunch of other commandments in the rest of the book, but those are like hard. Like, well, like which ones are commandments? Which, like, do I need to or not to? And there's so many things, but 10 commandments are tangible, touchable. Like they can look at it and say, this is what it is. Right. I think the same thing is true for all of us. Like if we have those things, like these are the steps, these are the process. Again, Dan's 10 rules of direct response marketing. Like I saw what happened in Facebook with people who design images and posters and boards, and people were printing them out and putting them on the wall. And they're like, look at this, we got from Dan. Like, it's so cool. And it was just me teaching, Dan's 10 principles. But because of the way it was structured and people saw it, it was like, this is a tangible thing. I can follow this. I can follow the 10 commandments more than I can follow a whole bunch of random rules and processes and like, right? So what is your dogma? What are your beliefs, your laws, your principles, your rules? You can give people and be like, boom, here's the 10 commandments of funnel hacking, of biohacking, of weight loss, of charisma hacking, of whatever your thing is, right? Yes, so hopefully that works. Okay, next is result-based frameworks. Again, if you've gone through most of my training, I talk a lot about this, like the fact that we don't just like a lot of people don't understand how to teach correctly. And the way to teach correctly is through result-based framework. So this is the framework that's going to get you this result. Okay. And so here's step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think Stacy Martino, who's one of you guys in the inner circle, she probably does this the best at her events. Her and Paul, if you look at their sessions, they come up and each session is a framework. Okay. And it's all tied to results. So this session, we're going to show you guys how to get blank. This is the result. And this is Stacy's 7-step system to give you that result. And then she teaches step number 1, number 2, and she teaches the framework. And then that's session number 1. Session number 2 comes back. And so for all of you guys, like to become good teachers, become good educators, you got to start looking at that, where every result that you can get for somebody, right? You need to turn it into a very simple step-by-step framework. Here's the result. You want to lose 20 pounds. Here's the result. You want to build a funnel. Here's the result. You want free YouTube ads. Here's the result. You want fill in the blank, whatever result you can give somebody. And then here's the step-by-step, like here's the 5 steps, 7 steps, 12 steps, whatever it is to that process. Now becomes a finite, tangible framework that they can touch, they can take, and they can run with. Okay. So that's the next step. Number 2 there is result-based frameworks. Okay, number 3 now is attractive characters speak in parables. They tell stories, right? And we've got to be good, really good at this. In fact, in the influential writing workshop that we'll be covering later on inside of this book and with everybody here, one of the exercises Dan has everyone do is he has everyone go out and build a story inventory. So he talks about story and he says, now go, they had everyone take like a 30-minute break or an hour-long break and actually write out an inventory of their stories they can share people. And I've been telling people this for a decade because I heard Dan do it the first time. I was like, okay, I'm going to do what Dan said. And I sat down and actually built out like, okay, what are my stories? And I had my potato gun story and I've got this story and this story. I started mapping out as many parables as I could tell that would give somebody, that would help somebody to have the aha, to break belief to whatever it was I was trying to get somebody to do. Okay. Because sometimes you'll be sitting there speaking and I'll start talking, all of a sudden a story will pop in my mind. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good story. And I'll like tell it. But a lot of times, like those stories don't pop in your mind unless you've written them down first. Right. And so the reason why I can sit here and I can talk for 90 minutes or an hour or 3 days, or whatever, without a ton of notes sometimes is because I've told these stories so many times. I've written them down. Like I know that like, here's a principle I need them to understand. Here's a story I'm going to tell to tie to that. And it gets really, really simple and really easy. Okay. So if you want to become a better speaker, a better presenter, a better teacher, it's really figuring out like, what are the parables you can share that help people to understand the core principles you need them to understand, right? To break the false beliefs you need them to break, to be able to get them to move, to act, whatever it is. Like, what are the stories you have? Okay. Dan's the same way. If you've been watching Dan Kennedy's stuff, like he has a story for every single principle you want to talk about. In fact, when I do my interviews with him, it's literally like I send over like, here's the 10 questions I have for you. Here's the 10 things I want you to teach about. And then he basically sends me back my notes. Okay, I'm going to tell my story about Gunther Ranker, my story about, welcome pests versus the annoying guest or vice versa, and then this, and he's got like the list of the stories, list of the parables, right? So he thinks like, here's the question, here's the parable, here's the question. So it's not question and answer, it's question, parable, question, parable. So you need to have a lot of parables at your disposal. So when someone's got a question or something comes up or you're teaching a principle that all of a sudden you're like, how do I explain this? Oh, I have a parable I can share, I can plug in right here. Okay. So sitting down, actually building out an inventory of story. What are your parables? Okay. And as you see things happening in the marketplace or online, and you're like, oh, that's a cool, like I can tie that back into something, look at that thing and go back to your parable, your story inventory and add that in there. Like I would literally make a Google Doc and call it your story inventory and have it like, one side, like like, here's the story. Like the story's like, oh, the time I did blah, 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 blah. And the moral of the story, or the result, or the false belief, or that I'm trying to break, or whatever it is over here, is make a 2-column thing with parable, like the story, and then the thing, the goal of the story, what it's supposed to be. Story, goal of the story, story, goal of the story. And you do that, it's going to be awesome, because you have this big inventory of stories that you can pull out and you can use over and over and over again. Okay. And then the last thing here with dogma is that people have insider language. Okay. And Dan talked about that a lot in the personality copy, of like, is we have to have our own language, right? Because when outsiders see you in here, like, man, they're having fun, they're doing things, they don't understand you. Now, if they become part of you, they become part of your organization, part of your culture, things like that, they start learning your insider language, how you phrase things, what you say, things like that, then they become part of it, right? When someone becomes a funnel hacker, they start learning all of the language of a funnel hacker, right? They learn the parables, they learn the stories, they learn all these different things, but we have our own insider language, okay? In the Dan Kennedy world, Dan's a horse guy. And like, when he started talking about list building, it wasn't like, here's how to build lists. It was herd building. You got to build a herd of people. And like, this is the phrases that he used when he was building up his stuff, right? Mine's different. Like, I've got my own phrases, my own insider language that funnel hackers know and that they're aware of. And so same thing's true for you. Like, what is the insider language you can create for people after they come inside into your community? Okay, so that's dogma. So again, character identity, core problem stories, dogma, and then the last section here are storylines. And these storylines weave into these other things we've been talking about, right? So a lot of times, like, if I'm looking at these different storylines, like if I'm taking on the expert leader identity, one really good storyline for an expert leader is loss and redemption. Actually, even like reluctant hero. If I'm a reluctant hero, loss and redemption is a great storyline as well, right? So loss and redemption could be like, think about Rocky Balboa, right? Look at the Rocky movies. Rocky is the reluctant hero. He didn't try to become the Italian stallion, right? He was like a B-level fighter, and he was just doing his thing. In fact, when they first offered the fight, he's like, I'm not going to fight Apollo Creed. I'm not going to do it, right? But he came in and he went through this loss, and then he redemption, and he became Rocky, right? And so he was the reluctant hero. So loss and redemption was a great storyline as the reluctant hero. Okay. Loss and redemption is also a great storyline as an expert leader, right? Like, hey, I am here because I was just like you. I lost everything. I went through bankruptcy. I gained a lot of weight. Whatever the opposite of your result is, right? I lost it all, but I figured out this process, this framework, and I've redeemed myself. And here's redemption, loss and redemption. Okay. Okay. Then before and after, this is again, very simple. Like, you see this mostly in like the weight loss and the business opportunity space, right? I was overweight and then I lost weight. I was broke and then I made money. Okay. My teeth were all jacked up and I got straight teeth. Whatever it is, like, before and after stories are one of the most powerful things we have in marketing. When we're selling anything, a good copywriter is the thing that makes the difference between a good copywriter and a great copywriter is a great copywriter has the ability to use contrast. Okay, contrast is what sells everything. Light and dark, before and after, overweight, skinny, broke, rich, gangly teeth, nice teeth. Like the contrast between the two is in a before and after is the key to good selling. And so again, the better you become at contrast, the better you become at selling. And so before and after stories weave into all of these, right? You can have them as report of the evangelist, the adventure crusader, but you're looking for like, what are the before and after stories that I can share with my audience, right? These all tie back to parables. Like, these are all the storylines for your parables. Number 3 is amazing discovery. Again, we talked about amazing discovery is one of the best storylines for the adventure crusader. They're venturing, they're figuring things out. And also like, I found this amazing discovery. I want to share with you, right? So the amazing discovery storyline and parables typically sync when you are in your adventure crusader character identity. Okay. Secret telling. This is like Russell's whole life. I just tell secrets all day, right? So secret telling, I figure out the secret. Okay. So secret telling can fit as the adventure crusader. Secret telling, honestly, secret telling can fit in all the character identities pretty simply, right? Because either you found the secret as a leader, you found the secret as you're on this adventure trying to find things, you found the secret as you're reporting from somebody, you learned it from somebody, you found it in their archives, or it's like you found the secret, doing something and now you want to share it with the world. So that one fits in all the storylines. Testimonial stories. Again, we talked about this in a couple different areas, like getting testimonials you can share with people are very, very powerful. In fact, if you look at Stu McLaren, I think is probably the best of this. Like, Stu is really good at his parables are less stories of him personally, and they're more stories of his success students, right? And so if you look at when Stu teaches, I've seen him do this all the time. Like, he'll find out like, what are the questions I need to answer, and then what he does is not, here's the insert parable. It's like insert Susie's story, insert Julie's story, insert Mike's story, whatever it is. And so someone say, well, Stu, like how I'm a so-and-so, how am I going to grow a membership site? Oh, well, that's a great question. In fact, let me tell you a story about Julie. And he inserts testimonial story right there. Okay. So Stu is the king at that, is pulling in the testimonial stories to resolve the concerns and solve the problems. And then number 6 storyline is us versus them, which is obviously finding a common enemy, throwing rocks at them, which is so good for, splitting the audience and getting people either for you or against you. And people that for you become the hyperactive fans. And so this is the principles that I want to share with you guys as we're designing our characters. Okay. This is something I've been re-geeking out on again as I've been doing this, because, for me, obviously I've got different businesses that I'm running, but also like my personality is plugged in different businesses, right? I've got my character as Russell, the leader of ClickFunnels, and now I have my character as Russell, the owner of Magnetic Marketing, taking on the stewardship and the sponsor, stewardship of my mentor. So it's these things I'm re-questioning and rebuilding them as I'm looking at how I communicate with that audience, right? Same thing now with all the Napoleon Hill and the old personal development books I've been acquiring and buying. We're launching a personal development company around there. And so I'm looking at this through that lens again. It's like, okay, what's the character I would be using in this type of business? Now, when I say character, I want you to understand, like, I'm not making something up or changing things. It's just how I'm positioning the stories, right? Because they're different. So it's not, and Dan talks about embellishing. I'm not a big fan of embellishing so much. So it's like just telling the right stories that match the identity that's going to get the most people to respect you, to follow you, to pay you money in that sphere of where you're communicating, right? And understanding that. So as I've been going through this again for my different businesses, I want to share with you guys, because I know that all of you guys have done this at some level. My assumption, the fact that you're in the inner circle, is you've done this at some level. You've got pieces of it. Maybe you've got all of it. Maybe you have other companies, but I would look at it through this lens again and say, okay, have I done all of it? What am I missing? What can I add? How can I tweak things? How can I add things? Because if you look at this again from the long term, this isn't something that we're doing. This is my 60-day email sequence. Like, this is a never-ending novel, a plot, characters, adventures, ideas. It's never-ending. It means I've got to keep coming up with new lost redemption story. I got to come up with new parables. I got to come up with new insider language. I got to come up with more miracles. I got to come up with more. Like, this is a revolving thing that's always happening, right? Because you're going to bring somebody into your world, into your audience, off of a hook that's really, really good. But you keep them here by telling these stories, by building a relationship with the character, by serving. And that's really the key there. So I hope that helps you guys, because this is fun stuff. So that is the mini workshop on designing your character. I will post the doodle image in the Slack group. I'll also post the video of this in the Slack group. If you enjoyed it, please let me know. If you have like an aha, go to the Slack group, like, oh, my biggest aha was blah, or anything like that, because that'll help me to be able to see what things you guys like. And again, we're probably going to break down and do this 3 more times with the influential writing workshop. It was a 3-day event. So I'm going to give you a section 1, section 2, and section 3, and do kind of a similar process. And hopefully it'll simplify these things and put them in a way that we can all go and implement them really, really quickly. So thanks you guys so much for hanging out here. I've got to bounce because I've got my kids' wrestling practice. I'm actually coaching here in about 20 minutes. So I got to get out of here. But thanks you guys so much for hanging out. I appreciate you all. And we'll see you guys all again soon. Bye, everybody.